known for having one of the highest rates of executions in the United States. The state has executed the most number of individuals since the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976. As of 2021, there were over 200 individuals on death row there. First, a little explanation on Texas's death penalty laws. Only murder is a capital crime, and only murder in certain circumstances. Nationally, there were 51 women on death row as of October 1st, 2021. This constitutes 2.08% of the total death row population. 17 women have been executed since 1976. Only 2 women out of the 583 who have been on death row have been executed in Texas since 1982. Betty Lou Beets, who was executed in 1985, and Carla Faye Tucker, who died by lethal injection in 1998. It has to be mentioned, since imprisonment is a hangover from America's racist history, that over the last 5 years, more than 70% of death sentences have been imposed on people of color. Nearly 40% were imposed on Black defendants. The women on death row in Texas are of different racial makeups, but the stats paint a pretty clear pic.
It's Sully, Jones, and Johnson, and this is Kitchen Table Research, where we do the research so you don't have to. If you want, we do have some pictures for this case that Johnson will post on our social media. So if you want to look at pictures of the topic we are speaking of today, which is the remaining women that sit on Texas's death row, you can find pictures of those women on our social media. So like I said today, I am telling you kind of shortened versions of the other 6 women who currently sit on death row in Texas. If you want to email us, our email is kitchen.table.research@gmail.com. If you rate, review, and subscribe, I will just take a screenshot and send it to one of our social medias, and we will send you a bumper sticker. Also today, there is a Innocence Project meeting on YouTube. It's live as we record, and we're keeping tabs on that, but it will be saved as a recording. So if you just type in Innocence Project data onto YouTube, that will be a video of the Innocence Project explaining some of their scientific and new processes in forensics. So if some of these stories spark an interest in you, I'd go listen to that. And there's also, and then within the Innocence Project, there's petitions, and there's a petition for one of the women that we are talking about. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. And my goal is to tell you a summary. Like I said, they're shortened versions, and I want Jones and Johnson to tell me if the quote-unquote killer had means, motive, and opportunity, if they believe they are guilty of the crime, and most importantly, if you believe the death penalty fits the crime that these women committed. We've already talked about several women on death row, but I wanted to see what the other 6 women sitting behind plexiglass, not allowed to hug anyone, have visitors 4 times a year, and are allowed commissary and food from the vending machines when a possible visitor can buy the food on one side, hand it to a guard who will then pass it on to the inmate. That is the closest contact that Texas inmates on death row get to their loved ones. Every woman wakes up before the sun has had a chance to come up to start work. If a woman cannot work for whatever reason, they are put in isolation. These women do support each other. They praise the Lord together, make baby blankets for mothers on the outside who cannot afford basic supplies. I imagine living in concrete, working for nothing, having limited physical contact and emotional contact from family. These women, if so lucky, have lawyers who do visit them. When Darley's son, for example, had cancer, she was never even allowed to give him a hug. These women are more confined and have more women on death row than any other state. For example, in Florida, Ted Bundy, who served his time there before he was executed, was allowed to impregnate a woman. And he was also allowed a TV in his cell along with other food amenities. But these women do not have this. The walls surrounding these women are bleak and endless. At one point, I stated on our Carla Faye Tucker episode, I would rather be on death row than in general population. I have since changed my mind, knowing what these walls contain: sadness, regret, revenge, guilt, loneliness, and hopelessness for many. Speaking of Carla Faye Tucker, we have done an episode on her in our earlier seasons. She was found guilty of capital murder and was executed after given a reprieve by George W. Bush. So she basically asked if they could stay her execution, and George Bush denied that, and she was, in fact, executed. If you'd like to hear another famous woman who sat on death row that was also executed, her name is Betty Lou Beets, and she was executed in 2000 for murdering her husband. And she was quite a poisoner. Mom, you did some research on Betty Lou. Can you just give us a minute or two summary of her?
Ooh, Betty Lou was married. I don't have those notes in front of me. I'm
So
sorry.
it'd be before 2000 because she sat on death row for a while. So I believe that it was in the 80s that her crime takes place.
She married, I believe it was 6 different times. She killed 4 husbands. She remarried one of them who she did not kill. Most of her murders were middle of the night. She incapacitated them, then buried them in her acreage in back of her house. It took them some time to find those bodies. I believe on one of them she poured like a concrete driveway over them.
Oh my gosh.
Um, she was pretty vicious, and her motive appears to be, if you die, then I get all your money and your pension.
Okay.
So
So her motive was money. Her means was poisoning or in the middle of the night suffocation of these men.
yeah,
Okay.
trauma, yeah.
Okay. So she was, in fact, like I said, executed in 2000. But let's dive into the women who are currently on death row. And I'm just going to go in the order that I researched the cases in so that they're more random so that you guys have a less biased view. Like I didn't rate them from who I think is most guilty or whatever. So, okay, so my first case is Linda Carty. She is a British citizen from St. Kitts who moved to America, got her citizenship, and went to school for pharmacology at the University of Houston. She had no prior violent offenses, although she did, however, get caught selling marijuana. She'd stolen a car and impersonated an FBI agent and made a plea on this set of charges, this crime. She made a plea with the state to be a secret informant for the next 10 years. And she had provided police with several names, and because of her information, she helped take thousands of dollars of drugs off the street, and police were able to make several arrests. Carty was even working with the DEA at the time. And we actually will hear from one of the DEA agents that she worked with. So in 2001, Linda was 42. She was living in an apartment in Harris County, which is Houston, but was moving out of her apartment and was staying at a hotel for a few nights in between moves where she did not need her car. And so she let 3 men who she was acquainted with use her car for one night. The first night, I believe, she stayed in the hotel. Meanwhile, at the old apartment complex, a beautiful young couple had just had a baby boy. The 4-day-old was extremely loved, and family was staying in town to help the young couple. They actually had uncles sleeping on couches. I believe her mother or his mother was there. So their apartment was a little packed with everybody that was there for the excitement of this newborn boy. The 3 men who had borrowed Linda's car went into the couple's apartment that night, beat up severely several family members as they slept, and kidnapped the mother and child. They were then placed in Linda's trunk, and it was later found the mother had been bound and suffocated. But thankfully, when the police arrived, they were able to save the little boy's life. Linda was charged with capital murder for being the co-conspirating in the kidnapping of a child and murder of a woman. Her story to this day is she was in the hotel and knew nothing of the kidnappings. So when they go and find these cars, which are in a field, and Linda kind of leads them to this field, the police are asking her, do you know where maybe these three men would have gone? And she says, I don't know. Sometimes they hung out in this area. And when police arrive on the scene, not only is Linda's car at the scene, but her daughter's car is also at the scene. So her daughter's car doesn't have any forensic evidence in it. But I'm not quite sure if Linda said, sure, you can borrow mine and my daughter's car. I'm not quite sure how that story plays out. Like I said, I just did quick summaries of these stories. But at any rate, Linda does help the police find the car. Linda's car contains the evidence, and her daughter's car is in the field but has no forensic value. So the prosecuting lawyer, known as the Undertaker, Jeremy Garino, who had sent 21 people to death row, now convicted her on capital murder. The evidence was circumstantial, as receipts for baby supplies and newborn clothing were found. Diapers and even a car seat had been installed in the car that was used in the kidnapping. Like, why didn't you put the baby in the car seat instead of the trunk? Anyway, her ex-boyfriend testified Carty had lied about pregnancy to quote-unquote trap him before. Like, she had used this ruse before. That's what he says. However, Carty testified that she had indeed been pregnant and had bought the supplies in anticipation of her newborn baby. However, she had suffered a miscarriage, which had been corroborated by her daughters. Not by any medical, but her daughter did state that she truly believed her mother was pregnant. Carty is quoted as saying, if I had wanted a baby, I could have made my own. They also found a bag of surgical supplies, and she testified that they were just a pair of bandage scissors, a stethoscope badge, and Congress letters to her niece for graduating a medical program. Which was in fact true. Her niece did graduate, and that was the gift that Carty was to give to her. So when they say they found surgical supplies, it's not like scalpels and gauze and, iodine. It's a gift that's in a gift bag that has these little knickknacks for a new nurse. So the three conspirators that did the kidnapping had violent priors, but none of them received the sentence that Linda did. So these three men did not receive the death penalty on their case. Carty maintains that she was set up by the men who had discovered she was working for the DEA in her informant status. However, again, evidence against Carty is that 11 calls were made between the three men and Carty's cell phone that night. However, Carty was not at the scene, and no DNA was found on the victim or in the victim's home or in the car. It has never been verified that Carty was indeed pregnant. The problem with this case is she is a British citizen, and the British consulate was supposed to be called and told, hey, we have your citizen, and we are convicting her on a death row case. The British consulate stepped in and actually stopped her first execution and has tried to get her extradited back to Britain. The US, however, is not playing ball and won't even send over the police files for British consulates to review. So British solicitors, which are just what they call lawyers in Britain, should have been made aware of her arrest and placement on death row, but Texas never told anyone in Britain that they had her in custody. They were not made aware of her arrest or trial. And one solicitor is quoted as saying, we would have sent the best over there to give Linda Carty a fair trial. And in the defendant's side of the case, Carty's DEA informant that she worked for was not allowed to testify, but was quoted as saying, Linda would never have committed this murder. She's just not capable. So what do you guys think about this? It's a lot of information to swallow, I know, because I'm shoving an entire death row case into 10 minutes. But
yeah, it's I really wish I knew more about the forensics and stuff, because to me it's okay, she had the means, because I guess it's just saying, hey, random men I know, can you kidnap a baby for me?
Right.
Anyone can do that.
Right. Well, not anyone, but she did have the means to these gentlemen and knew that there was a newborn baby in her apartment
Yeah.
complex.
Opportunity, I think you mentioned she was alone that night in the hotel.
Yes, and it is confirmed that she was at the hotel all night.
So, I mean, if she was like, hey, bring me the baby, she has the opportunity because she's alone. Although it's very stupid because, walking into a hotel, there's a bunch of witnesses and stuff.
Yeah, especially if 3 men are like bringing a newborn, like a 4-year-old into a hotel. That seems a little sus.
Yeah.
Or
And then,
a 4-month-old.
No, she was 4 days.
A 4-day-old, not 4-year-old.
No, she was a newborn.
Gotcha.
4 days. So she wasn't even.
and then motive, sure, I guess trapping a man is a motive.
And
but
they
I
were
mean,
not together when the kidnapping happened. They had been broken up for quite a few months at this time and had really not had a lot of contact with each other.
The motive was money?
Like to sell the child? I mean, I just don't know what she
To
was.
kidnap the child and ask for ransom. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was to sell the baby on the black market.
okay, so
What would be her motive for that, though? I mean, she wasn't poor. She wasn't rich by any means, but she was actually upsizing her apartment and moving into like a nicer area.
to me, the motive doesn't really make sense because let's say she did lie about the pregnancy.
Right.
And then she's like, okay, I need to get a baby. Why then would you lie about having a miscarriage to your daughter and have a witness that knows you're not pregnant? And
I
then
guess
B,
because that like gives her I guess maybe it was an excuse as to why she had all the baby supplies and like receipts for car seats and strollers and stuff.
sure, but it sounds like she lied or not lied about it to the daughter way before this case.
Right.
And then it just doesn't make sense to me.
And I don't know if the
And then
motive was to kill the woman. To my knowledge, she was not sexually, I'm pretty sure she was not sexually assaulted. I don't know if they meant for the mom to die.
yeah, to me, like if she did do it, it would be like, just get me this baby, and then these men did whatever they wanted to do. But to me, it's like was there no plan to deliver the baby?
Right. Like for her to have like a medical record of her actually going into the hospital and delivering.
No, like how were the guys going to get her the baby?
Oh, I guess.
Like they left it in a field. That doesn't make sense. If the plan is
Right.
I need a baby,
Put it in the
why
car
didn't she have it?
seat because she had a newborn car seat installed in her car. Put the baby in the car seat and take it to Linda. What's the point of kidnapping the mom?
Yeah, I mean, did these guys never say like, "Oh, we were supposed to bring her the baby at this time and then we didn't?" Cuz like if there's no plan to get her the baby, then why would she ask them to get it?
Yeah. What do you think, Jones?
Well, you clarified for me that the mother was found dead in the trunk of Linda's car, but the baby, the 4-day-old, remained alive. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
And the mother was bound at the wrist and ankles, and she had been strangled. So I guess she, maybe they meant to keep her alive and she fought and they ended up, strangling her or accidentally killing her. I'm not sure.
And was there any evidence of her like paying these guys to do this? Like why would they
No.
agree to do that?
No, there's no, as to my knowledge, there was no money transaction.
Yeah, so she definitely didn't do this. She didn't pay them to do it and they didn't bring her the baby, so like there's nothing there.
And the only link is her car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just find it weird that like the daughter's car is also there, but I'm not sure if maybe they said, "Hey, can we borrow a couple car?" Maybe they were like, "Hey, we're going to go help you. Like we'll help you move out of the apartment." And she's like, "Well, take me and my daughter's car and you guys can help pack stuff up and move for me." I don't know. My biggest concern with this case is that Texas never told the British consulate about it. And so for her rights as a British citizen, she should have had co-counsel or her solicitor should have.
Does she also have U.S. citizenship?
Yes.
Does she have dual citizenship?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And
that
Texas just won't
convolutes
play
things.
ball. Yeah, like Britain has asked and asked and asked for an execution of stay. They did. I believe she was scheduled for execution and the British consulate did stop it.
I think
But
so too.
again, like the fact that Texas just won't hand over any of the police files, any of the forensics or lack thereof is very questionable.
And she is on death row today.
Today, yes. And I
Okay.
got her information if you guys want to go watch a special about her. There's one on Darlie. It's on Prime. Susanna Reid, which she's British. I'm sure you guys have heard of her. She's a pretty big investigative journalist. She does an interview with Darlie, and there's 2 episodes, and she does one with Darlie and one with Carty. So if you want to go watch Carty tell her story, you can go there.
Yeah, it's just crazy that she's convicted for being a conspirator based on what seems like he said, she said.
Well, and I
Because
believe that's one of the men were sentenced to life sentences, but I think one of them is already out of jail that actually committed the crime. So why weren't they held to the standard?
because men hate the idea of women hurting children more than men hurting children.
I think that's right. Women get very upset with.
Well, and we haven't finished recording this part of Darlie, but or done it yet in episode 8. But we've got a whole paragraph about the misogynistic viewpoint of men against women, and are women targeted more for crimes because they think they're going to get off. The men think to implicate a woman, she might get off, where they know that they're not going to get off because men are evil and wicked. I don't know what I'm trying to say in there, but
that there was some sexism involved, it sounds.
Yeah, sexism, misogynistic kind of stuff. Yeah.
Just
whatever.
For child crimes specifically.
Yeah.
People are like, well, men don't bond with children the same way that women do. Like, they don't have that connection the way that women do. So when a woman hurts a child or supposedly has, people react a lot more strongly than when a man does.
More like messes with your psyche for a mom to hurt her own child than for a father to hurt a child, which again
which
doesn't
so
make sense. Yeah, it's stupid, but okay, are we ready to go on?
Sure.
All right, my next one is Kimberly Cargill. So it's 2010 and we are again in Houston. Kim is a third-time divorcee with 3 children, one by each of her ex-husbands, who had both gained custody of the first 2 children due to Kim's toxic behavior. So her first 2 kids she's not allowed to see them. She still has her third kid in her possession, and at the time, her ex-husband is trying to go into a custody hearing so that he can gain full custody of the third child.
So she's got 3 ex-husbands and 3 children by each a different man.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay. She was also in a current custody battle with her third ex-husband over her third child, and things were not looking good for this case either. So Kim decides to hire a quote-unquote nanny to help out with her kid while she works, showing that she is a good mom. Like, I've got my kid covered. Kim had hired a beautiful Black woman by the name of Cherry. However, Cherry was mentally disabled and had the capacity of around a 9 to 12-year-old and also suffered from a seizure disorder. So I don't think it's appropriate to leave your child unattended with Cherry. If one of my neighbors wants to come over who's 12 to quote unquote babysit Mikey, I'm not going to leave them alone because a 12-year-old doesn't know what to do in case of an emergency, or they don't have the ability to jump in the car and take my son to the hospital. There's several things that come into play here. So I don't think it's wrong that she hired Cherry to help her due to her, mental capacity. But I think that Cherry should not have been left alone with a child, and that's not fair to Cherry. So Cherry.
Well, it also depends on whether Cherry was well controlled on seizure meds.
I believe
some
she
people
was.
Have been on, because some people are on seizure meds their entire life, and the only seizure they ever have is the first one.
And I'm, as far as I know, she did not suffer them a lot. So it does sound like she was being taken care of.
Okay.
I'll go on. I think it might answer your question. Okay, so Cherry gets called forward in this custody hearing that's going on with this third child, and Kim does not want Cherry to testify. And so one night she calls her up and she's like, hey, Let me take you out. Let's go to Chili's. We want some Southwest egg rolls and margaritas. And Cherry hangs up the phone and she just has a bad feeling. And she even calls her one of her family members, who tells Cherry not to accept Kim's invite. It's not a good idea. But Cherry, with her mental disability, has a hard time saying no, like, don't we all? And she trusts Kim, so she does go to dinner with her. The two women went to dinner, and afterward, Kim kills Cherry. So she takes her out to a field. We're not quite sure how she killed Cherry, but she wrapped her in trash bags and tossed her on the side of the road like literal garbage and set her body on fire. When a pizza delivery guy gets lost, because remember, we don't have like maps yet, he turns around in this field and sees a garbage bag and he gets out to investigate it. Isn't it like, why do these drivers always, I think it's because men pull over on the side of the road to pee. He probably had to pee. He's like, I'm going to pull over. I'm going to pee. He gets out of the car. He sees this unfortunate sight. But not only does the pizza guy have this piece of information, at the same time, it's Father's Day. And Cherry's dad was a pretty big pastor. Cherry always attended church to see her father preach. She really enjoyed this. And especially on Father's Day, they were all expecting Cherry to be there. And as Cherry was not in attendance, it set off red flags in her father's head. And after he preached that day, he would go on to place a missing persons report. And it doesn't take long for the police to connect the pizza delivery guy with Cherry's father and put the pieces of the puzzle together. When they go out to forensically investigate this scene, creamers from Burger King were found underneath Cherry's body, which had DNA matching Kim. She leaves this piece of evidence that happened to not be burned underneath Cherry's body, which, remember, had been wrapped in bags and set ablaze. Kim's boyfriend calls her. Like, how is another guy dating her? Like, she has another boyfriend? What is going on?
That
She's
would
a
be
master
sick.
manipulator. Yeah, she's just a master manipulator. He tells Kimberly that Cherry has been found dead, and in a panic, Kim said Cherry had a seizure, and so she had dumped her, thinking that the police would get the wrong idea if they had found a dead Cherry in her car.
Did
But
she dump the body
yes,
and drive off in her own car?
yes.
Okay.
I don't think I told you guys this piece of information, but Kim's a nurse. So she should have known what to do if Cherry was having a seizure. At the very least, take her to the emergency room. But she did not follow proper procedure that was taught to her in school. And after the incident, it is believed that she premeditatively took her to dinner and then brought her to the scene of the crime, somehow incapacitated her. The police believe she was hit over the head with something, but because of the burning, some forensics were lost. But that piece of DNA that came from the coffee creamer, along with Kim not wanting Cherry to testify against her in court. So in this case, we have DNA connecting Kim and also like the allegation that Cherry was going to testify against Kim in court.
In the custody trial.
So the night before Cherry's supposed to testify at this custody hearing, Cherry decides to go to dinner with Kim, and her family's like, no, 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 don't go. Like, we have bad feelings about Kim. Like, she's not a good person, right? But Cherry is very childlike and very trusting. At court, Kim was on trial for the particularly heinous crime against a disabled person and was therefore up for capital murder. When her child testified against her, her oldest child, he said, "There was never a moment I was not scared of her." Kim's ex-husband also states, quote, "One time she threw a hammer at my head because I got her ice cream with nuts when she asked for no nuts." And that is my Kimberly Cargill story. So, Jones, why don't you go first on this one? What are your thoughts and remarks?
Well, it appears to me that
Guilty?
she should be. It appears to me that she's guilty.
I mean,
Yeah.
she has premeditation. She has the means. Obviously, she was with Sherry that night, and that's corroborated by Chili employees and Cherry's family. She has the motive because of the custody hearing. And what's our other one? Means, motive, opportunity. She meets them all She premeditated a heinous crime against a disabled person, which made it a hate crime, is why she was up for capital murder. I mean, to me, across the board, she's guilty. Again, I have my thoughts on death row, but if I was to send somebody to death row, this would be the person.
I don't see that she has anything positive going for her in her life. The fact that she completed, and who knows what a nurse means. Does that
Right.
mean you completed your CNA, your
CNA, LPN, RN.
right.
I believe she was an RN.
Okay.
Do you have any other remarks?
No.
All right, O. Johnson.
So she obviously had the means. I mean, Cherry was going to be easily overpowered. She has access to trash bags and accelerant because everyone does.
Yeah. And Burger King creamers.
Yes. She had the motive because she didn't want her to testify at the custody battle. And the motive could also have been something as small as Cherry got her the wrong ice cream. It could have been literally anything.
Oh my gosh. Cherry didn't get the Southwest egg rolls at Chili's.
For real. Like if she's has this character history of
Right.
getting
Mental
that
illness.
upset over simple things, the motive could have been anything, but the not testifying at the custody battle is definitely a strong one.
To have
Do they-
3 ex-husbands and 3 children who testified, I don't think all of them testified against her, but certainly I think both ex-husbands did, and the one that she was in the custody battle with. And I mean, she's bad news, guys. Bad news.
Yeah.
Do they think that Sherry was killed in the car or once she?
They don't know
They never
because of the
really
fire, but I think that maybe Kim is like, hey, let's go, I don't know, get ice cream. Don't put nuts on it, though. Let's go get ice cream. And, Sherry, being trusting, drives out to this secluded area. And in my mind, I believe that maybe they were having a conversation and Kim picked something up, again, like a hammer or a wrench or anything in the car. And I think she hit her over the head. Because I don't think Cherry would have, gotten out of the car. So
Okay.
I believe, in my opinion, I believe that she incapacitated Cherry inside the car. Now, there's no blood, to my knowledge, I don't know if blood was found inside the car. I do think that Kim went and got her car cleaned out. But, I mean, this comes from Paul Holes. If you only hit somebody once in the head, that initial trauma might not cause blood splatter. If you hit them again, then it will spatter. So the first hit, you might not get a lot of blood. Johnson, have you heard Paul Holes say that? Can you corroborate that for me?
He says that about a lot of injuries because,
Right.
a lot of crime scenes, they're like, how did the perpetrator get away? Wouldn't they be covered in blood?
No.
And Paul's always like, it really depends on the injury, but a lot of them, even if the first blow does create blood, it takes, assuming you're not hitting an artery, it takes time to seep out. The perpetrator's gone by then. They're not going to have a ton of blood on them.
Right, unless they continually hit them over and over and over again, which causes blood to then spray.
Right. Well, even then, only like the artery spray, even if there is spatter, it's going to be, it depends on the position you're in,
Yeah.
Like if they're laying down and you're over them, it's not going to go, up all the way into your face if you're standing up kind of thing. If you're behind them, it's going to spatter towards the front and then you're not going to have it on you. There's a lot of variables, but it happens often
Well, and I
that there's
think that
not a ton of blood.
I think you could hit somebody over the head hard enough to incapacitate them without causing like a skull fracture or an incision.
Definitely. But her motive, I think, is most likely the not testifying because I think Cherry she wouldn't have been aware enough to know not to tell
Yeah.
Kim that she was going to tell the truth. And B, if it was just something in the moment that had set Kim off, I mean, we have signs of premeditation. So I think it's definitely the trial was the motive.
And I do want to put a picture of Cherry up on her social media. Like I said, she was gorgeous. She was beloved by her family. Her father was a pastor. She was big in the church and she sang in the choir. I mean, she was a valued member of society. like you said, because of that, her family had talked to her and they knew that she was going to testify negatively towards Kim because Cherry didn't have really the ability to like lie, like you said. Let's keep moving. So we're going to go guilty across the board. Okay, so the next one we're going on to is Taylor Parker, and she just recently became a member of Texas's death row about 11 months ago. So her trial happened in 2020 or 2021-ish. And Taylor, to me, is similar to the Casey Anthony case in several ways. Both have the death of a small child, and both were pathological liars. Taylor's story is filled with grandiose lies, manipulation, coercion, and murder. Taylor had been married twice, and she's young. She's like 25 or something. Taylor had been married twice and had a kid with both men again. So, again, she has one child from the first husband and a child from the second husband. Her rights as a mother had been taken away, or at least as far as I know, the fathers kept their children away from Taylor. She was not allowed to be alone with her children. After her last child, her second child, due to complications, she had a total hysterectomy. In 2019, right before the world would end, she met Wade Griffin at a rodeo, and they quickly began dating, and Wade was just obsessed with her. I mean, if you go look at her pictures, she is a pretty, young brunette. I could see why somebody would be attracted to her, and apparently he just stole his heart. Wade says, "I believed every word she said, but you can't," this is my quote, "you can't see red flags when you're wearing rose-tinted glasses." And she was an expert pathological liar. She claims she was an heiress to, I can't remember all of her lies. This is crazy. You guys need to go, I'll give you my source on this. You guys have got to go listen to her story because I can't even put it into short form. Her lies are so insane. So she has one where she's the heiress to a syrup company, and then she's an heiress to a construction company, and then her mother doesn't want her being an heiress, and so her mother had put a hit out on her. And, it's just this whole one lie that leads into another, kind of like the Casey Anthony trial where I work at Disney World, and as she walks into Disney World and is waving at people who don't recognize her, she gets to the end of the hall and the police realize that Casey's been lying all along. But let's get back to Taylor. So Taylor and Wade were really in love with each other, and actually Wade's family liked Taylor. She offered to buy Wade's family a huge ranch in which they could hog trap and keep hogs, which was their family business. She also gave news to Wade that she had become pregnant. But remember, she had had a hysterectomy.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. She must be the Virgin Mary. Wade was extremely excited to become a father, and Taylor went all the way. I mean, she faked sonograms, she wore a pregnancy belly, she announced on social media, and one of her friends even threw her a gender reveal party. And while she was on social media, quote unquote, pregnant, she joins a few moms in the area, pregnancy blogs and such on Facebook and other social media sites. But pregnant Taylor was not. With a promise of millions of dollars and a new baby to make Wade's dreams come true, she had to do something before her birth date came. At first, she said at 40 weeks, the baby was not ready. And after 2 weeks, which Jones, after I get done with this, I want you to weigh in on this specific piece of information. So at 42 weeks, so she keeps lying, saying the baby's not coming, the baby's not coming. The baby's still not here. They would have definitely pulled that baby out before 42 weeks, but I'll have Jones comment on that later. So then they schedule a quote unquote induction date for her, and coincidentally, a bomb threat is called into the hospital the morning of her induction. During her pregnancy, like I said, she had joined Facebook groups. And in these groups, she had met a woman, a young mom named Reagan Hancock. And the two seemingly had a lot in common. Both had already previously had children, and both were around the same due date. The two became friends, and one day Taylor decided to pay Reagan a visit as Wade was out of town in Oklahoma buying hogs. As the two friends began talking, Parker pulled a knife on Reagan, and Reagan fought for not only her own life, but the life of her child, who was in the home. The child was 3 and was a witness to this crime. Reagan fought like hell, but being close to her due date and pregnant, Taylor overpowered Reagan and sliced her neck and then sliced her belly hip to hip, cutting the baby and placenta and all out. Taylor fled the scene, and while driving in Idabel, which is, I believe, in East Texas, she was pulled over for driving erratically by a police officer. When Taylor was pulled over and rolled down the window, the police saw the baby and the umbilical cord still in Taylor's pants. And Taylor had stated that she had just delivered the baby. But the police officer put just a little note in the back of his head that said, "This blood is dry." But at any rate,
the baby was in her pants?
the baby was like in her lap, yes, or in her pants. I'm not quite sure. But I think the baby was sitting on her lap, and the umbilical cord she had tucked in to her genitalia region.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Okay. Are you guys with me?
This is so confusing. But so far, I'm okay.
Okay. So we know that Taylor is not pregnant. She goes to a quote unquote friend named Reagan, who she had met on Facebook, who was also pregnant. She, in front of her 3-year-old child, Reagan's 3-year-old child, sliced Reagan's neck open before slicing her belly and taking the baby out. And when she took the baby out, the baby was still alive. And when Taylor is pulled over for driving erratically and has the umbilical cord stuffed into her pants, obviously the police officer, although he has that little quirk in the back of his mind, 911 arrives at the scene and takes the baby and Taylor to the hospital. But obviously, when Taylor is rushed to the hospital, it doesn't take them long to figure out that Taylor had not given birth, had not been pregnant because she had a hysterectomy, and is turned over to the police. Unfortunately, I don't know if the newborn baby was alive when EMTs arrived on scene, but the newborn did not survive. Taylor was tried and found guilty to death row in 2022. Both ex-husbands testified to her mothering or lack thereof, saying they did not trust their children in their own mother's care. Reagan, the victim's mom, is quoted as saying, "Taylor is an evil flesh demon. Take her straight to death row," where Taylor sits today.
So Reagan was dead.
Yes.
She tried a scalpel and got the baby from out of a
she took a
C-section?
knife from the Reagan, I believe she took a knife from Reagan's residence and sliced her throat before slicing her belly open.
Oh my God.
And like I said, even after Reagan had her throat slit open, she fought like hell. I mean, when they found her, they said that Reagan put up an extremely efficient fight she was actually about 35 weeks along.
Okay.
So, Jones, why don't you tell us a little bit about the development of babies, cesarean sections, hysterectomies, and her taking the baby out with the placenta and leaving the umbilical cord attached? Like, in your medical opinion.
Well, first of all, 22 weeks and 5 days. If it's under that, 22 weeks and 5 days is kind of, if it's past that, they may not survive, but they may survive for a baby. Okay.
Especially with the medical developments that we have today.
Right. And so what they really want to say is when you're 27 weeks along, you're probably going to go into the NICU and you're going to have some stuff. And the biggest one is probably lungs, ears.
Yeah, ears don't develop till the end, so they can have hearing problems that normally resolve themselves, I think, but sometimes they have
Yeah,
to have the what is it, a cochlea?
a cochlear
Cochlear implant.
implant. 34, there may be something, but mostly with 34, they may go into the NICU, but
There's
pretty
a
much,
high rate for survival.
yes,
Because I
yes.
actually went into the hospital at 35 weeks thinking that I had preeclampsia. Luckily, my blood pressure was a little high, but they checked me out. I stayed in the hospital for a day, and then me and my husband went back home. And luckily, I did not give birth at 35 weeks. Although, as Joan states, it's a high rate for survival at 35 weeks, but you want to cook that baby as long as possible.
Right, right.
But by 42 weeks, I think they would either schedule an induction, which they, supposedly Taylor says that they did schedule an induction at 42 weeks, which just means that they give you the hormone and medications and set you up for that. They send you the hormone that tells your body, hey, deliver that baby, Pitocin.
Right.
And so if that didn't work, I would assume that they would have to go in for an emergency cesarean because you can't leave the baby in for too long.
No, you don't, because, the placenta is what they're getting blood. And
Nutrients.
as soon as the baby comes out, you've got to do the placenta so that you don't have blood into the newborn.
And so she did take the placenta. So the baby and placenta and umbilical cord were still all attached to the baby when the baby was taken to the hospital after she abducted the baby. And so would the baby been able to survive still attached to the placenta outside the womb?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Isn't
So
the
she's
placenta supposed to come out with the afterbirth?
yes. So
So
basically
it's like supposed to be separate.
yes, normally you deliver the baby and the baby
And then,
comes out and then you deliver a placenta, which is basically an organ that a woman's body builds to support the baby while the baby is in growth, and it's a massive filter so that the baby stays as safe and is not
well,
getting toxins, and it also
yeah,
provides
it's
nutrients and
blood.
oxygen back and forth.
Yeah,
There's two main arteries that go in and out of the placenta. One carries blood in, one carries blood out. And so your body is meant to give the baby all of the good things and filter out all of the bad things, which for a placenta and for your body to just naturally build that is pretty badass. Side note. Johnson, what do you think about this?
It's so obvious. I don't think I need to say anything. She's
Yeah.
so guilty.
Yeah, I mean, she's guilty. She's basically found literally red-handed. I just want to give my sincerest apologies to Reagan's family, the Hancock family, and her husband's family, because this just happened, you guys. And I mean, her lies are so crazy. It's like, my mom put a hit out on me. The cartel is after me. I own a syrup manufacturing plant, and she did provide money at first. And so she's feeding Wade just enough crumbs for him to stay. And of course, one of his quotes is, she keeps his belly full and his balls empty.
Every man's dream.
So we're going to go guilty all the way across. I mean, again, I think this goes back to mental illness. I just think there is a screw missing for Taylor. I will go over all my references at the end, but if you guys want to take a closer look at this one, I did watch some stuff on YouTube, like literally just the first videos that pulled up under Taylor Parker's name, or you might need to put Taylor Park convicted Texas, because Taylor Parker is a very common name. The podcast that gave really great information and that I've been addicted to is done by I believe she's a lawyer, and Tank Sinatra, who is a famous memer on Instagram, and their podcast is really, really good, I have to admit. She calls herself Investigator Slater, the lawyer, and she does her research. I feel like they do the research like we do, but she's extremely smart. Their podcast is great. I would highly recommend it. And they just recently put out an episode about Taylor. So I will link that episode when we post pictures. Okay, so I just have one last question for Jones about the Taylor case before we move on. And my question is, if when Taylor took the baby out, because she took the placenta and the umbilical cord is attached to the placenta, and the mother gives blood through that placenta, which delivers oxygen to the baby. And my question is, if Taylor would have just cut the umbilical cord like they do in the hospital, would that baby possibly survived?
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility because the whole point of cutting the placenta is to make a bridge from newborn in the womb delivery of oxygen to newborn delivery of oxygen outside the womb. And so by cutting the placenta, you're making that baby take its first breath. Okay. And that starts that whole breathing process.
And it kind of
And
clears their
slapping them on,
lungs.
yeah, yeah, and slapping their butts and all that gets them to go.
Yeah. Okay, so that's really sad. And I feel like considering Taylor had delivered two babies, like if you want a baby that's alive and you went to all the trouble to murder the mother, why did you not just like keep the baby alive? Like she should have known. Does she not know anything about
Stupid.
pregnancy? She's been pregnant
Stupid.
twice.
Yeah, stupid. She probably never even knew they delivered a placenta.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not. I mean, sometimes they just do it and you just really don't know because you're
Right.
kind
And
of
they don't
out
really
of it.
tell you that,
Yeah.
oh gosh, your placenta's been delivered. But I have a feeling that she never knew to begin with anything about the birth process or about parenting or anything else. It sure
Right.
doesn't sound like she was on top of being a mom.
Right, which she wasn't because her other two kids weren't with her.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
well, I just want to send my sincerest condolences to that family because, like I stated, that crime just occurred here in Texas, and it's
And
very brutal.
now they've got a mom and a baby gone.
I know.
Oh, you're right, Anna. I don't understand how some of that happens.
It's mental illness. I mean, I
It
don't think
is
there's
mental
anything
illness.
else that you can.
And, we don't possibly give enough credence to what mental illness looks like.
Is there like in the DSM or any other scientific research that talks about women in particular that steal babies? Because that's like a whole subset. Like we talk about, family annihilators, spree killers, mass murderers, serial killers. Do you think there's like a certain subsect of women that kill? Because there's a few cases of obviously in this episode where women try to take babies. Like, do you think that's a
I
biological
don't think,
drive?
as far as I know, that is not part of the DSM diagnosis. But I have not read that version 5 from cover to cover. But if there's not, maybe there ought to be, because not only is this case relevant in Texas, there was that lady up in Colorado who did the same thing. She kidnapped that lady and cut her open to get the baby.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard several stories of this.
Yeah, there's several stories out about that. So, yeah, if there's not,
All right.
Yeah, okay.
They are, as far as like the psychology and profiling goes, they are one of the archetypes, like the Black Widow.
Okay.
Yeah. Studies, though, they never have very much on women, so there's not as much data out there as there is on other
Men.
archetypes.
Well, and men that kill because they kill much more often than women do. It just seems like it's a big motive behind a reason that a woman kills, especially younger women.
Yeah, I think it's usually some form of like psychotic break, but obviously
Or
not in every case.
like maybe an attachment disorder.
an
Yeah,
attachment
stuff like that.
disorder could be. And yeah, I think that's
Controls.
reasonable.
All right. Well,
But what about somebody like Chris Watts? Where did he get his motive?
well,
I mean,
because he
what?
was having an affair and he
Well,
didn't
I
want,
know that he's
yeah.
having an affair, but surely there are better ways to solve that than killing your kids
I
and your
know. It's
wife.
like, dude, just go get a divorce. My
Just,
gosh.
just, just end it.
Yeah. Yeah. Not end it that way. End your marriage.
Right, end your marriage. I
And
mean, if
like, what do
it's
the kids have to do with it?
right, why did he kill his kids?
Well, because he just didn't want the responsibility.
Well, I know the answer to that, but it's unrelated. Anyway,
I was going to
Okay.
say, we are going to do a case on male annihilators starting with our second season, and we're going to get into, because we did some female annihilators, we're going to get into some men starting our next season to give you another little breadcrumb of where our research has taken us. Signing off. You guys have a great day. We'll see you next time.